In today's video, we're going to talk about the best 5 companion plants for tomatoes and how they do such a great job to give you a bigger harvest. We're also going to talk about 2 plants that you should never plant with tomatoes unless you want disastrous results. Our tomatoes are coming along nicely this year, even if the colder weather this spring pushed our traditional planting date back a bit. There are 2 extremes when it comes to companion planting of any type. The one side is like the magical, mystical, this plant loves this plant and this plant hates this plant. These ones are friends that help them grow bigger or stronger. This one helps this one taste better. And then there's the camp on the other end of the spectrum that really feels that companion planting should be backed by science. When I set out to write my book, I chose to go the route of science. I do not discount that there have been several companion planting strategies that have been successful, that have been passed down from generation to generation, and a lot of those have been actually backed up by science now that we're in, modern times. Unfortunately, a lot of modern research has proven some of those to be completely false. So today we're just going to talk about 100% science-backed companion planting strategies. However, if you've got some companion planting methods that you swear by, leave them down below in the comments. Let's get into number 5, which is probably the most popular companion planting plant that's ever been. And for some good reason. It's not quite as magical as a lot of them would have you believe, but that's marigolds. There are very few plants that produce a substance that is toxic to nematodes, specifically root knot nematodes. Root knot nematodes are microscopic roundworms that live in the soil and on plant roots. They injure plants by feeding on the root cells, and the root system can become damaged to the point where the plant can't properly absorb nutrients and water. Plants may appear stunted and discolored, and they may die. The roots may have knots or swollen areas. Nematodes may enter the root system and get trapped and not be able to continue their life cycle, or if they start to chew on the roots, they can be poisoned. French marigolds are the best. Tangerine happens to be the most potent variety. Number 4 is any member of the allium family, so onions, chives, garlic. According to Cornell University's home garden website, members of the allium family actually put off such an odor that it does repel pests, especially red spider mites. Red spider mites are pale orange to red and feed on the underside of leaves, and they're really difficult to see with the naked eye. They suck the sap out of your leaves, and damage appears as many shiny pale yellow marks on top of the tomato leaf. Eventually the leaves turn brown and die or fall off. Now, if left untreated, it can lead to a very severe issue with actually the formation of webs on the plant. Now, if you prune your tomatoes like I do, it actually removes a lot of the lower leaves and branches as the season progresses, which allows plenty of room underneath tomatoes to plant members of the allium family. Now's a great time to sow green onion seeds. They're super easy to grow from seed and grow fast as the weather warms up. Just sprinkle some on top of the ground and either cover with a very light layer of soil or compost or a light layer of mulch. And I've also got some chives growing here. Chives form clumps as they multiply. You can dig up these clumps and divide them and get lots more plants to spread around your garden. They're great for warding off spider mites, they're great in cooking, and they provide beautiful flowers in spring. Number 3 is cowpeas. Now, I grew up in a southern family, and cowpeas or black-eyed peas was a staple on New Year's Day. If you have stippled, colored spots on your fruit, it's probably stink bugs. One way to help mitigate the damage is to plant a trap crop. Now, a trap crop is a plant that you're not looking to harvest from. It's kind of a sacrificial plant that you put, and this plant happens to be something that this pest likes better than the one you don't want them munching on. So cowpeas happen to be a favorite of stink bugs. So plant a trap crop of cowpeas about 10 feet away from your tomatoes, and that'll draw those stink bugs to that versus your tomatoes. Number 3 is parsley. Now, other than being used in a lot of cooking, it's a great companion plant for almost anything in the garden. The reason is it has the ability to attract hoverflies, but you have to let it go to flower, and it will do that. This summer, parsley flowers will attract hoverflies, the larvae of which will eat aphids and tomato hornworms and hatched worms that are on the small side. The parsley flowers will also attract parasitic wasps who actually lay their eggs under the skin of tomato hornworms. So when the eggs hatch, the babies eat their way out of the tomato hornworm, killing it. Not pretty, but effective. It should be noted that any plant with similar umbel flowers like carrot, dill, and fennel will do the same job. Now, my favorite companion plant for tomatoes comes in at number 1, and it has to be basil. Now, just the smell of basil and tomatoes growing together in the garden says summer to me. And that's a good enough reason to plant them together right there. But basil actually helps keep the 5-spotted hawk moth away from your tomato plants. This is the moth that lays the eggs that becomes the tomato hornworm. And they find the tomato plants through smell. Tomatoes, as you probably know, have a strong, unique scent. But basil has an even stronger scent. This confuses the moth and it will look elsewhere. I've done this for 7 years and I have never had a tomato hornworm on my tomato plants. Except for 1 year, when I planted a tomato plant on the other side of the property and forgot to put the basil, those had tomato hornworm. I won't make that mistake again. Another reason to grow basil other than the great pesto is for the flowers. Bees absolutely love basil flowers and they will flock to them. Now the problem is, as soon as basil flowers, it gets bitter. The leaves get bitter. And so if you're growing it to cook with, you don't want it to flower. So you want to pinch off any beginning flower buds that you see, and that'll actually keep the plant bushy, and it will keep it producing, and it will keep it from getting bitter. I grow other basil in other parts of the garden, and any basil works for any of this. Green basil, Thai basil, holy basil. But I leave some for the bees every year. I grow a row of basil in the ground in front of my tomatoes. If you're growing tomatoes in containers, a basil plant or two with the pots does the same thing. They don't have to be planted in the same soil. All right, I promised you 2 plants that you should never grow with your tomatoes. Number 1 are potatoes. Potatoes and tomatoes are in the same family, the nightshade family, and so they share a lot of the same diseases. Because potatoes are usually coming along first, they're going to start to get diseases first, right when your tomatoes are starting to, really start to grow well. And they're not going to have any problem sharing their diseases with your new tomato plants. So you want to make sure that you keep your potatoes and your tomatoes at least 15 feet apart. The second thing you don't want near your tomato plants or any member of the nightshade family, tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, and peppers, you don't want them anywhere near a black walnut tree. Black walnuts actually exude a chemical from their roots called juglone, and that will stunt or kill nightshades, especially tomatoes. They seem to be the most susceptible. So you want to keep those about 15 feet or more away from the drip line of any black walnut tree. To see how to properly prune and trellis your tomatoes for great growth and great production, click on this video right here, and I'll see you next time.